Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Wine, Women, and Words. Tonight, I am joined by Stacey as my guest co-host tonight, filling in for Michelle. Hi, Stacey.
Hi, how are you?
Good. And our guest author this week is Abby, and please forgive me if I screw up this last name, even though I shouldn't. It's Fabiaschi.
Perfect.
Oh, yay. I'm assuming Italian, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's why I said I had no excuse with a maiden name like Giovinazzo. And going back to that as my pen name, I have no excuse for screwing up an Italian last name. But we're going to be talking about I Liked My Life. And this is a great book, so I can't wait to get into it. But first, before we get into all that fun stuff, let's do a round robin. What's everybody drinking tonight?
Well, let's see. I have a Black Stallion Chardonnay, a little buttery Chardonnay.
Ooh.
Yes.
Buttery Chardonnays are the best.
Chardonnay for me as well.
Ooh. We're all drinking whites tonight. I am drinking a Chenin Blanc. It's from Cape Brew. It's one of our Wink wines that we get.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, it's a cool label. It's really neat.
Cool bottle. Yeah, fun.
Yeah. And apparently all of their labels are from Wink. You can only get them through Wink, and they're all specially artsy done. So I feel all special when I have our Wink wine. But for all of these, all of you out there who want to take part in our Wink discount, it's a great way to discover great wine. Wink's wine experts select wines matched to your taste, personalized to you, shipped right to your door. And the bottles like this are only $13 a bottle, so they start off really cheap. Just go to trywink.com/WWW podcast and you get $22 off your first order. Again, that's trywink, spelled TRYWINC.com/WWW podcast. And if you guys miss out on that, don't worry, we'll have it in the show notes. So with that being said, and everybody's got their wine, let's dig into this book. This is such a unique book, and this cover is beautiful. I don't know how many times I kept trying to turn it around the other way because it's upside down.
It really frustrated my grandfather. He was like, Abigail, I kept picking it up the wrong way, so I took the cover off and I threw it in the trash. I was like,
oh, yeah.
Grandpas are so supportive.
Yeah.
So with a unique book like this, how did it come about? What was the spark for the idea for this?
Sure. I can talk a little bit about the inspiration for the book. It started for me. So it's a psychological family drama about a workaholic husband and his rebellious teenage daughter who are having to redefine their family and figure out what happened because their matriarch has committed suicide and they're left behind. And so you hear from all three of them. You hear from the mother sort of from above as she tries to make things right for this family that's in kind of a toxic place, and from the teenage daughter, and from the father, the husband. From my perspective, the book started with the teenage daughter. I had lost one of my closest friends when I was 15 in a tragic car accident, and it really shaped me. It remains a defining moment in my life. I think I matured really quickly, but not very graciously. So I suddenly didn't relate to, I didn't care about who my homecoming date was going to be or getting the Jabot jeans or whatever the things that I had cared about so much, even the day before. But I looked at, and I had my grandmother, who was my best friend, had died in her late 40s, and my aunt had just died of pancreatic cancer. Like, I think I had a lot of loss at a young age. And so I started looking around at these people who were 20 and 30 and 40 and 50 and thinking, gosh, if I'm 15 and I've experienced all this loss and I'm so sad, they've experienced exponentially more loss. And here they are planning holiday parties and smiling. And instead of seeing that as resilient and strong, I really saw that, or my teenage mind really saw that as fake. Everyone was faking it, that it was okay, but it wasn't okay. And so I stopped relating to people, and I built a lot of walls, and it took me a long time to to learn from those experiences and to get something beautiful out of them. And so the book started with the want of exploring mourning and guilt and grief at that tender age. And so it started with Eve.
Eve is such a great character. I really enjoyed her line of story through that. And so it's interesting to see where that comes through. And so, and where that really comes from with it. And so was this a book that you've had on your mind for quite a while that you wanted to write? Or, because I see in the back that you had a previous career before this, like so many of us who go into writing.
Yeah. I mean, I can't even fathom paying my mortgage as a writer if you just went all in right away. I was in high tech, had a career in high tech, and so I wrote this kind of on nights and weekends. And to be honest, the first draft I wrote a long, long time ago. I was 24, I think, when I started it, and it was a nights, weekends, long plane ride kind of hobby, and it never. I wrote it to unburden kind of my grief and explore this process through these other characters instead of myself. For as much as I write about grief, I'm terrible at it personally, and so it just kind of sat on my computer. I mean, I had been married during the first draft, I think 1 month when I started it, and I had no children. So Brady and Maddie's sections were not very mature, and it just sort of sat on my computer. It wasn't ready to be published. I knew that. And then I had another book that I wrote, a terrible book, but it was much lighter than this. It was considered chick lit at the time, and it got picked up by a great agent. And so that was really validating, just as maybe I could, I don't know, maybe something mine would get published someday, sort of thing. But again, it was a terrible book, and it went out on submission in 2008 when sort of that, the housing market had collapsed, and apparently people stopped, reading books. So that was kind of why they felt like it hadn't sold. When I read it now, I feel like there might be other reasons, but it was a little bit valid. It kept it in the back of my head that I could do this. And then about 7 years after that, my father passed away, and he was 53. He died in his sleep of a heart attack, and he was my person. I mean, he was everything to me. And so at that point, I had been married. Well, I guess it was almost 10 years later, because I had been married 10 years and 7 years. Anyway, I had a kid, and I was pregnant. And so like my story had changed. And when he died, I stopped writing altogether. It flattened me. And I really dove into my work, to my career, I think, just to stay busy. And when I started to come out the other end of that kind of haze of grief 3 years later, I was starting, I don't know, I was the job and the stuff, I don't know, my dad dying, I had similar medical stuff to him. And I thought, am I playing my cards right? And right as I was wondering all those things, I came across this book, I Liked My Life, on my computer when I was looking for something else. And it's like felt enormously important to revisit the story. Mm-hmm. It was almost like I was unburdening, my losses again onto these other characters, because at that point I had mourned as an adult and saw the differences between, a teenager who can go totally inward and just be, I remember saying to my parents, I'm not speaking today, versus being a parent and who has like a mortgage to pay. You can't go to work and be like, I'm not speaking today, or to your kids, mommy's not, talking today. So very different to have responsibilities and see that. And then also having seen my husband grieve, he was very close with my father, and see the difference between men and women. And then to see, probably most importantly, as a mother now myself 2 times over, to have more of an insight into what, if anything, I would want my children or need my children to know if I left too soon. So I think all of those things kind of culminated in, revisiting the story in the book. And I did. And when I finished it, I sent it to my agent, who I hadn't, spoken to in a couple of years, and she hated the book. She didn't use that word. She was very, very gracious, but she fired me, which is a lot like getting fired from a volunteer position at a hospital, because you are not being paid. And so it was very humbling, but she gave me this great gift. There was a woman in her office who loved the story, or a reader for them, who had loved the story. but she said, there's fatal flaws. It's broken. And she took copious notes. So I'll send them to you. Just to be clear, don't send me the revision, but I was like, yeah, I get it, and it ended up being this great gift because they were really, the notes, I read them and I was like, oh, of course, and it really made it no longer be just me trying to go through these experiences in my head, but really made it a story,
Now, it was funny because when I was on Instagram and I happened to see Stacey's feed, and I saw Stacey had posted a picture of the book, and I saw her review of it. So I was like, oh, that's why I've got to have Stacey on, because she'll have such great insight. What questions do you have, Stacey? What are your thoughts on the book?
Well, I loved the book. My father passed away just this past Thanksgiving. So even though I'm much, much older, than a teenager, I totally got and identified with her desire to just completely turn inward and want to shut down, and just the way you portrayed grief. It really hit home to me. And I was also really curious about the Maddie's truths towards the end when Meg writes the letter to Eve and she's like, these were, your mother's truths. Was that inspired? Was that something that somebody personally would say to you, or is that just something that you created?
Yeah, I'm so sorry for your loss. I always feel badly when people really personally relate to the story, but it's such a universal experience that so many people, do. So the truths were, they're sort of, and some of them were inspired by people who don't even play a big role in my life. Some of them were my grandmother, who played a huge role, my father, who played a huge role. One night, my sister had a couple glasses of wine and went through and was like, that was Dad, that was you, that was me, But I think that what it really was things that people have told me that stuck for whatever reason. Like the hangover cure was this random person in college who I barely knew, but damn it, like it works for me and it stuck.
Right.
Yeah, that was kind of fun. Actually, that section was written in like 3 minutes. It was like, okay, the truths. And you just like, I just kind of was like, blah. And it was kind of fun to like see what popped to mind. Yeah.
I liked Meg, the sister. I liked her a lot because it was just kind of like one of those with her character. It was like she was trying to help. She wanted to help, but it's so hard when you're on the outside, looking in, you're not going through it yourself. Because I haven't had the grief really that personally. I mean, we had my husband's grandmother, who I was very close to, die a couple of years ago. And my husband's mother died just before I met him. And it was actually because, that's part of the reason, part of the things I can relate to with the book. I met him because of her death. Because he got in touch with his friends from high school, and they were like, oh, hey, we're all getting together to go to this Renaissance fair. Why don't you come with us? It's a whole group of people who worked at Disneyland at the time. And I just happened to be in that group. And that's how we met. So it was just very serendipitous. So reading that just made me keep thinking of that. And I find that it's one of those really good therapeutic books, really, where you have this family who's going through this, rough time. But at the end, I mean, I don't want to give away any spoilers, but things can be okay. And you get to see grief expelled in really fairly healthy ways when it comes to it. Because grief isn't a clean thing. It's a messy thing to go through, regardless of what happens, what you're grieving. So to see other characters go through it in a way that's fairly relatively healthy is a good thing. And it's good to have books like this in that regards.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, even as I wrote it, one of the things that I was coming to terms with and figuring out and becoming a believer in is exactly, this idea that when you can rise above the fog and the haze of grief, that there's clarity there. Like there's insight, and there's even beautiful moments, like you meeting your husband, the things that wouldn't have happened otherwise. But it's at the expense of whatever you lost. It'll never be worth it. So there's this injustice to that, that it takes time, I think, to digest it and and to open your eyes to the idea that you can learn from this experience, or that there might be something that the universe, for me, because I quit my job ultimately because of my father's, very young death. And this is probably too much information, but 2 years later, I was diagnosed with this blood condition. I 100% would be dead if I still had my regular job. There's no version on this planet where I would have gone to the doctors because my calf was a little bit swollen. But my calf was a little bit swollen because I had 2 pulmonary embolisms and I was about to die. So I think that, to me, I do think of all of those things as related in some universal way of like, his death got me thinking about my mortality and got me thinking about my lifestyle and what I wanted to do with my life in a way that changed my whole course. Mm-hmm. Now, would I rather have my dad here? 100%. Yes, I would, much rather have my dad here, but you can't pick. And so I do. I think that there's this, I don't know. You don't want to call it serendipity because it's not as positive as that, but there is this momentum to these things, and they matter, and that you can come out on different ends of it. So, when people just read the copy, I always worry that they're going to think it's like a suicide book. But to me, it's much more about resilience and about the outcome,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, even with just suicides, these things happen, life happens, and you got to see, what happens when those people are left behind.
Exactly. And that's what the story's about. It's not about Maddie. It's about, Eve Brady. Yeah.
And I have to say, without giving away any spoilers, I was completely caught off guard by the end when it came. I mean, I was surprised, but then I was relieved, and then I was like, oh, okay, it makes, because it's hard to talk about without giving us the spoiler away, but I was very surprised at the little twist at the end with Kara, and then my heart broke for Kara with this, the secret and the gravity of what happened that she's carrying around.
Yeah.
That had me yelling too. I finished this up last night, and I was in bed, and I was like, whoa, what just happened?
Right.
I had to go back and reread it to try to process it. So for those of you who are watching and or listening, you're going to want to pick up the book and reread that section too a couple times, because it's like a whoa. I was not quite expecting that.
Oh, good.
It's always fun when there's a twist in the book. Yeah. I like good twists, especially ones that you're not expecting. Because I was not expecting that at all, and then it's like the author's keeping you on your toes,
right? Well, and then it was heartbreaking all over again, but for different reasons.
Yeah,
because through the book, like we've gone through the course and we've watched them grieve and not come to terms with, but get a little further down the road to acceptance, maybe. And then when that happened, I was like, what? Because it shook me all up. But I mean, I was so glad, but then at the same breath, I was just like, oh man, I thought it was very well done.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think it changes the terms of, but it doesn't change the consequences. And yeah.
Yeah, and I felt for Rory through so much of it, where, I mean, in my day job, I'm an estate planning paralegal. So we see a lot of the death, and we see, the hospice patients, because we're having to help them get their affairs in order. And we see the caregivers. So we see people in Rory's position all the time. And then I felt for her. She had my heart for so much of the book, just because of what she went through. For those of you who haven't picked up the book yet, I mean, she's caring for her mother, and she's like this outlier there for most of the time. Madeline is, well, I guess I could say, because it's not really a spoiler, because it's right there in the first chapter. Madeline is wanting to bring this person into her family's life. And so we were watching Madeline watch her and watch what she's going through. And you're wanting to seriously beat on Rory's brother for being an idiot for multiple reasons. But yeah, she was such a great character in that.
I fell in love with her. I really did, writing her. And I think that she, well, first of all, I think it's something like audacious that I would do from beyond of like even thinking that I could possibly match, like find my replacement is I feel often like I have control of things in my household that I don't actually have any control over. And so that was the fun, like to write it and realize that I do that all the time where I'm like, I know I'm going to get my kids to play the sport I want them to play. No, you're not. No, you're not.
Yeah.
Crazy. They're going to do what they want to do. And, so, I think part of it was that, but also in Rory, I found this, this complicated woman, she had her life was on going in one direction and and the rug got pulled out from under her and she didn't lose her kindness and she didn't lose her way completely, but she did lose her ability to connect, with the outside world in a meaningful way, or a fear of connection or whatever that is. So I just really, I felt for her and I fell for her completely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, it shows the different aspects of grieving for different people. The shutting in, the teenagers dealing with it, and then dads dealing with it.
Yeah, and I mean, like for Rory, she lost her marriage over that, which is a very commonplace in tragedies like what she's gone through. And and I think, and I've seen all of those things happen. I've seen grief bring people together. I've seen grief tear people apart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Stacey, you have any other thoughts?
Let's see. I had a bunch of stuff marked. Let me go through.
That's the kind of reader I am. My books always have.
I mark all over my books. I really, really liked, there was a quote, in Eve, when she's journaling, and she says, "There are so many things I dare not say. I have quietly stopped being me."
Yeah.
And I was just, and that took me a moment because I was just like, I mean, that's profound, and that can be applied to so many situations, whether it's, because of the loss of a loved one or things that are happening, at school or whatever. I think that's probably one of my favorite lines in the book. It just really struck me. And I mean, I stopped, I highlighted it, I flagged the page. I just thought that was just really profound. And how many people we pass, during the day who are going through something like that, and we don't really know because they just put on this facade of, everything's okay, and I'm just going through the motions. I don't know. It just really, that one really struck me.
I found that when I was, writing the book, I started going back to some of my journals from when I had lost my friend. I wrote that line when I was 15. That sentence. Yeah. Yeah. And when I read it, God, I mean, it could almost tear me up. Right? Like I could feel myself writing it, whereas that book that I wrote, that terrible book, I don't relate to a single line in that book now, but that line is, I feel like, so universal in that I could even think of times now as an adult and a confident, for the most part, mother of two and doing my thing, where there are days where I feel like, oh, I put on a mask today, I wasn't. And so I feel like it grabbed me and I was like, oh, I'm pulling that forward. It's coming in.
It's one of my favorite lines in the book. Because it can apply to so many different things. And I can think of lots of times when I've done that, when I'm not myself and my friends, and that line really spoke to me.
It is a great line. And with Madeline, I mean, she's much more complex and really, every other character gives her credit for it because you don't see it until afterwards. And then you see her relationship with her mother, things start to come out with her mother. I mean, how much of that do you think affected what the choices that she made going forward with her life and everything?
Oh, I mean, I think so much. I think it's really hard to unravel our past experience. I believe this, in not outside of the book. I mean, I just believe that we bring all of our experiences to every interaction that we have as humans. And sometimes we realize it and sometimes we don't. But I definitely think, you know, she wasn't planning to go into motherhood at all, right? She was a career woman. She had really liked the lifestyle of dual income, no kids, and what they had going on. And then all of a sudden, you know, she finds herself pregnant and she has this baby. And I think she panics and says, I'm not going to do this the way that my mother did it. And then she applies the same rigor that she applied into her career, into this matriarch. She was going to be the matriarch of all matriarchs because she had something to prove, you know, that her mom couldn't do it and she could. And also she had a competitive way about her. I mean, she did, look, you know, her career was competitive prior to going into motherhood. So I think that her mother had a lot to do with a lot of the decisions she made, and that it took her, and Brady, you know, and Brady, I mean, I think where people have their this book made me think a lot about where our self-worth is tied up. If that makes sense, you know, so like for Brady, he wasn't a bad guy. Even at the beginning of the book, when he's harder to relate to, he's not a bad guy, but his self-worth got so tied up in his career. And you can see how it happens. I think it happens in a lot of homes. You know, it happened in my home for me when I was an early mom. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as much as this is a book is a statement about grief and going through grief, it's also really a statement on motherhood.
Yes.
Too, because you see so much of Madeline giving herself. I mean, I'm not a mom yet. And lately, since the Mother's Day has come around, sometimes I've been hearing stories online between, you know, Jenny Walsh, who's going to be on the show next week, and Michelle trading stories, and a comedian talking about these real truths of motherhood, and then reading about Madeline's experience. And I'm kind of like, you know, this kid thing that, you know, we've got going on right now, maybe that's not such a bad idea.
It complicates things, no doubt. Are you talking about the Amy Schumer video? Did you see that from Saturday Night Live?
I saw parts of it and I refused to let myself watch it.
I was crying. My sister sent it to me. She's like, you have to watch this right now. I was crying.
Yeah, it looks too terrifying for me at the moment. And then there was it Ali Wong? She's on American Housewife, and she's a comedian. She did a stand-up, and I was watching some of the stand-up that she did. And I mean, there's this one line. She's like, I promised I vowed to my husband till death do we part, but I will not sniff his butt like I have sniffed my daughter's butt. I'm like, huh.
Yeah, that's true. That's all part of it.
Yeah. So I'm like, you know, right now, dogs are great. Dogs. And I came with you with Stacey with your absolutely adorable addition.
Oh, I know, that was him scratching, so I had to go get him real quick. That's my little corgi pup.
Corgis are the best. I know. Whenever I pull out the podcast equipment, my dachshund that you've seen pop up on the video here, she's like, okay, it's podcast time. It's like she knows. And
that's so cute. It's like showtime.
Exactly. She thinks she's a co-host.
Oh, I don't know. He's roaming around in the living room. I did put, going back to the motherhood thing, because that was another thing that struck me, and I even put that in my review, was the quote, when she was talking about, you know, who's the crazy one, the lady who spent her life doing whatever she wanted, or, you know, me running errands all the time for two people who don't appreciate it.
Yes, I love that line.
That is where I am. My son is, I mean, you know, because it's like I work full time. I have an 8-year-old son, you know, and then with my husband, and it's like you try to find that perfect balance, and it's so hard. And you want to be the best, you know, person you can be at work, because you want to do a great job, or at least I do. I'm very competitive in my job, and I want to excel. And then I'm the same way at home, where I want to be the best mom, and I want to be all the things for my son and all the things for my husband. And I find myself a lot of times I get frustrated when I think I'm doing all of these great things, and like no one notices, and or they come in and they, what about this and what about that, and I'm just like, but I did, I did this. So I really related. Yes, exactly. So I really related to that side of it. And then I also really liked how Eve, at first, because she's just this self-absorbed teenager and it's all about her and they just don't think that way. But then when she started reading the journal and she was like, oh my goodness, she did so much. I love the parallel, how you showed both sides. And I loved how, as the story progressed, Eve really developed an appreciation, even though, it was too late for her to express it. But I loved how you showed that she eventually was like, wow, she did a lot.
And I talk to a lot of book clubs on FaceTime and things like this. And I always feel like it's important to note just personally that from what I have seen and observed and experienced, like, I think that you don't have to die for your kids to ultimately appreciate you.
Right.
I do think that, people who have mother experiences like Eve did, those mothers have a ticket, once they're go off to whatever they do next after high school, college, or whatever it is later in life, where there is a bond and an appreciation that happens naturally as your frontal lobe develops and your raging hormones calm the heck down, and you're able to see more clearly. So I don't think that it is not my belief that Eve would have never come to those same conclusions and been able to, if they hadn't had that experience. It just put her in the fast lane, so that her friends didn't relate to these, these aha moments that she was having. They weren't there yet because nothing had forced them to be there, quickly. But they're all going to get there, except maybe, but the rest.
Yeah, and I think we all eventually get there. We realize and appreciate what our parents do for us, and especially when we're older. And sometimes it's when we're off to college and we're having to do our own laundry and our own cooking, or sometimes it's just a matter of, wow, this real world adulting thing really sucks. I can barely take care of myself, and my parents took care of me.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, we eventually come to that, but yeah, something like what she went through matured her faster than the kids that are around her.
Right. And there's consequences to that, right? If you're surrounded by people, your peers are in one place and you're in another place, and not only have you lost your mother, but you've lost this innocence or this kind of time period where you are going to be selfish, and it's kind of expected that you're selfish, and all of a sudden she's not. So she lost all her, I mean, I just think it's hard in that way. Yeah. At that age to not relate. But mostly it's about resilience now. There's some heavy topics, no doubt.
So we're coming up to our 40 minutes here. Do you have any other books on the way that we should keep an eye out for that you want to share?
If you're very patient, I have a book that's coming out probably early 2020. It'll be done this fall, and then we'll see, go through the edits and everything, called Anything Helps, but it is not ready yet. So I'm a little slower to the draw. I'm about 2 years into this project, and it still needs some more work.
That's okay. I feel like sometimes when it comes to books, the slow and steady wins the race when it comes to books. Because, I mean, sometimes I don't understand some authors who are just like, every few months there's a few authors out there where they're just like, here's a book every few months, here's a new book, just cranking them out, and it's like, whoa. And then, but the ones I think, one a year is still fairly fast.
Too fast for me, apparently.
And but yeah, I mean, I feel like the longer you take to work on a book, and the more stringent you are, the better the book will turn out. And like our friend Scott, who's been on the show multiple times, he'll complain. We'll talk to him about how long it takes a book. Like my book right now I'm going on 4 years with my book, and whenever I start to complain about that, Scott's like, 9 years, honey. It's taken me 9 years to write my first book. And his second book, I think, is going on 4 or 5 years. So he's like, it doesn't get any easier. It takes time if you want to write something of quality.
I think it's true. And there's a back and a forth and a tug, you know, like I feel like I've now finally found the story. I know exactly the story, but it took writing through all these different lenses and characters to see how to tell the story. And now, you know, there's just a process to it that is totally inefficient. And I sit on panels with authors who talk about how great they are at plotting and they know, and I just sit there so jealous and wish that I had an MFA too, but I don't. And so it just, I write very inefficiently, but eventually a story pops out at the other end. So
eventually, yeah, I'm in the No MFA club as well. So yay us. But yeah, with mine, I'm like, so I'm at the point where I'm just to share with everybody because periodically I give I'm on the last bit of editing and before it starts to go out to agents and a few small press publishers. And because it's, by God, this thing is going to be published. I swear, I feel like I'm in 9 months of pregnancy for a child. And I'm like, this baby is coming out. Even if I have to throw myself down the stairs, it is coming out. And now that it's at that point, I'm starting to research the next book. And I kind of have this feeling of, do I really want to go through this again? Because I'm historical fiction. So I've got to get my history straight. And I've got to study my stuff and get to know my stuff. And I'm like, it's almost like having a second child where I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to go through this all over again. Am I ready for this?
If your friend Scott is right that it's not going to be easy, or at least my experience. I mean, it's just as enjoyable and just as tormenting, you know, the second, the third time around. It just is. But good luck to you. That's so exciting that you're close. It'll feel so good to type the end or whatever.
Yes, and oh, your baby Stacey is so cute. For those of you who are just listening, Stacey has the most adorable puppy. You should go to her Instagram to see pictures of him. It's prose_and_palette. Is that correct?
Yes, okay. Yes, that's correct. Yes, he's new. Can you say hi? Say hi, ladies. Can you say hi?
Oh, good natured.
How old is he?
He'll be 10 weeks. So he's a baby. So he cries. We're in that whole, he cries at night and.
Yeah, mine sleep in bed with us. We are those dog parents. We had dachshunds previously, and I told my husband when they were puppies, I don't want them in bed with us until they can get up and down on their own, because he was like insistent. They sleep in bed with us. And so when I told him that, he went and built stairs out of our old textbook.
He has like low rider. He has tiny legs. So
and I feel you. I've got dachshunds. I'm right there with you.
Yeah, we have there's no way. He would definitely have to have stairs.
Yeah, we have stairs for our bed, and stairs for our couch because of our little ones. I've got a really good friend who has a corgi as well, and they are just a hoot.
Oh yeah, he's full of spunk. He's sassy and he's teething, so he chews on everything. But he's a lot of fun. I'm trying to incorporate him into some of the book pictures and help him. He can help me pick some books, huh, man?
Yeah, you can chew on some books. It looks like.
Yeah, exactly.
After you read them before come over now.
Yeah, Michelle and I have a scale of destruction scale because she's got a husky, and it has caused some serious damage to some of her books.
Yeah.
So we have it on the scale of Lilo, which is my little one here. So we have it from Lilo to River on the scale of damage. Though sometimes Lilo does rival him for the damage that you can cause. So.
Well, so far he hasn't. I mean, he sniffs them a little bit, but he's not really chewing on them. I'm trying to discourage that. But, he likes toes, fingers and toes. That's his favorite.
It's a puppy thing. Sure. Yeah. Well, this was wonderful. Thank you both so much for joining us, and thank you for everybody out there. Pick up a copy of I Like My Life. We will have a link to it on our blog on our website, Wine Women Words Podcast. I have to remember to give the right links on the show. We have so many different links now guys. we'll have it. Look under our blog. We have a little blog going on the website, so we will have a link on it there talking about our episode and about the book. So you can check there and pick it up through the website. And keep reading our book of the month, The Phantom's Apprentice, because in 2 weeks Heather Webb will be on the show. So we'll take your questions and we'll be. Yes, we will be. That book has all sorts of spoilers, so that is going to be a spoiler-filled show. And then next week, we'll have Jenny Walsh on the show. So thank you both so much for joining us. It was a blast. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.